Hi guys, in this video I'm going to show you a flower preservation and what to do when things go wrong. So I have my resin mixed up here and I'm going to put in some of this Meyspring opulent blue color. It's a really pretty color with just a little bit of shine to it, and I'm only mixing up a few ounces. I think I did 3 or 4 ounces here just to get that nice base color. And I'm going to mix this up for a few minutes. Thankfully, with editing, you don't have to sit here and watch all of that. So now that that is all mixed up, I'm going to pour this thin layer into the bottom of my silicone bowl. Now this is actually a baking bowl. People use these for the small cakes, and I will link these in the bottom because they're in the description because they are really nice to use. They have such a good shine to them and they're so easy to use. Now I'm going to start placing my items in there. I have these rocks. They are like the clear colored rocks. I got these from Michael's, I believe. These work really good to keep your flowers in place when you are doing a certain design like this. Because they don't like to stand up very well, I use these rocks in between so that I can get some spacing and give some stability to those flowers. They don't really show in the final design. They disappear in the clear resin, but it gives it just that little bit more stability, makes it so that you can work with your flowers and get them where you want them to be a little bit better. So I'm going to continue to place all of these flowers in there. Now this one, I hadn't trimmed the stem enough, so it wasn't sitting down far enough. So before you begin, make sure that you really trim those stems so that they're good and flat, so that your flowers will stand up correctly and you don't have to deal with this while it already has resin on it. Now I'm getting resin all over my tools that I'll have to clean off. Anyway, back to placing since I have those all in there now. And now that you've got the idea, I'll speed this up to make it go a little bit quicker. Okay, now I'm going to start adding in the dried baby's breath all around. I'm really trying to make this look like the original bouquet so that it can sit on their table or whatever and they will have this forever. So I'm just going to place this in here, and you can see I'm taking the stems and just pushing those underneath where the roses are to give it that final look. And these I'm just going to continue to place as many of these in here as I feel to make it look nice. And again, I'll speed it up so it doesn't take forever. And now I'm going to start laying in some rock around the roses. I wasn't sure at first which one I was going to use, but in the end I went with these river rocks that have a more natural look to them than the crystals that I was thinking about using. So I'm just going to place these all around. I'm going to use my tweezers. This also helps with stability of the roses and to keep the baby's breath where I want it when I do that last pour. But it just kind of gives it some weight and makes it so that you can set it on an end if you want, or you can lay it flat and you can see the rocks through the side. It just gives it a little bit more depth. I like to add extra things in there to just give it a little bit more. I don't know if I'm making any sense to you guys, but that's what I do here. And I'll speed it up once more to make it go a little bit faster. Now we're going to let it set. Now this is the next day. I let that set for a good 24 hours and we are going to do the next pour. I have my resin mixed up. I have a couple drops of sapphire blue in it to give it just a little tint. And then I'm going to add a little bit of holographic glitter. Now the glitter does a lot. It adds some sparkle to it. And if you do get some micro bubbles in there, it hides it. So it's just one of those little tricks that I use to help enhance my projects. Now I'm using my stick and I am taking a little bit of the resin and drizzling it into the roses. I do not pre-dip any of my flowers because I like to do it all at once. So by putting a little bit in each of the roses, that helps get it to start settling. While I'm pouring the rest of it, that resin will start settling down into the roses and start bringing any air bubbles up. So I'm going to slowly pour all of this resin in. The reason I say slowly is because if you just dump it in there, your roses and your baby's breath and things like that have the chance of moving around. And you don't want that. You have it set how you want it. You don't want it to move around. So I'm pouring all of this in. I'm pouring it almost to the top. Now I did run out of resin and I had to mix up a little bit more to get it the rest of the way to the top, which was unfortunate, but I'm not going to include all of that into the video because, it just makes it longer for no apparent reason. But once I have it all poured in there, I take and make sure, once again, that I'm getting resin in all of those roses because it settles down into the rose petals as you go, which forces any air bubbles that are under it to come up. This type of project needs to be babysat for a while. Now what I'm doing here is I'm pushing on all of the baby's breath to get any air bubbles that may be trapped behind it to come up to the surface. But 100% this type of project needs to be watched for a while after you do the pour. And I'm going to show you why in the next clip. Okay, so now I've got it completely filled, worked all the bubbles up, and I'm going to take 99% alcohol and spray the top. I don't want to put heat on it and risk burning the flowers. 24 hours later, and this is what I have. Now, what I did wrong here was I did not babysit it. I had to go to work. I rushed myself, poured it, and then went to work and did not catch all the bubbles. So now I have to fix this. So I'm taking my X-Acto knife and digging into each one of these holes to pop that surface and to clean out any of these holes. Now this is going to take me a while because there are a lot of surface bubbles. Underneath there are not many bubbles actually in the resin. They came to the surface, but because I didn't watch it for the first hour or two and keep spraying alcohol or whatever people use to get rid of the bubbles, I ended up with a lot of surface bubbles. So now I'm going to go through, kind of drill these out. You can use an X-Acto knife, a razor blade, a little tiny screwdriver, whatever you have on hand. But if I don't do this, all of these bubbles are actually going to show. So I'm going to clean these out with my X-Acto knife, and then I'm going to blow out any of the remaining resin, dried resin that are in these holes. That's another key. You want to make sure you get as much of that resin dust out as you can. So I'm going to take it out of the mold here, and it's gorgeous except for those bubbles on the top. It is ready. I've got to get it ready to dome now though. So by popping all of those bubbles, which you can see there, now I'm going to take it into my kitchen and use a toothbrush and some Dawn dish soap and clean out all of those bubbles. And you can see there are roses sticking up from the top, but that's okay. Once we dome it, it's not going to be there anymore. Before I go wash this, I'm going to take a nail file and file around the edge. Now I'm not going to file all the way down. I'm just taking off a little bit of that roughness, any rough edges that are around there. I want it to still have a lip around the edge so that when I dome it, it'll catch the resin and not let it run down the sides. So I'm just going to gently file all the way around the edge until it's smooth. And then I will take it into the kitchen and wash it really, really good to make sure that any of that resin dust is removed before we do the next layer. And I'm also going to gently file down any rough edges from those bubbles from me taking the X-Acto knife and popping all of those. So I'm just going to go around, gently do that. All of the marks from the nail file will be gone in the next pour. That's the beauty of resin, that even though it looks like it's all scratched up, when we do that doming pour, it'll get rid of it all. Now that it's all cleaned up, I am ready to do the dome pour. Now I have about 2.5 ounces of resin mixed up, and I'm going to pour part of that over the top. I'm not going to do all of it yet. I'm going to leave some in my cup. You can always add more if you need it, but if you add too much, it's going to go over the edges, and then you're going to create an even bigger mess for yourself to clean up. So I'm going to slowly work this resin out to the edges to where that lip was. And this does take time and patience. You don't want to rush this. You want to make sure you are going around the whole piece and smoothing it all the way out to the edges. If you don't add enough, it's going to pull to the center and not be a complete dome. If you add too much, it's going to go down the sides. Now, when I start any kind of doming, I make sure that my piece is completely level. If it is not level, you're going to have a bare spot on one side and drips off of the other. So I always make sure that my workspace is absolutely level. I can't say that enough. If it's not level, you're not going to have good results. So I'm just going around making sure everything is 100% covered and that it's all the way to the edges, all the way around. Now, once this dome is on here, I don't use alcohol to pop the bubbles because alcohol thins your resin out a little bit and it could potentially make it go off the sides. So now that my roses are completely covered in resin, I don't have to worry about putting heat to it. So I will use either a long neck lighter or a torch to get the bubbles off of the surface if there are any. The resin I use, Unicone art resin, is very, very good and does not have a lot of bubbles. But we all know every resin has some. So that's how I will get rid of them on the top of this. So now that it is completely domed, I'm going to check it from every angle to make sure that my resin is to the edge all the way around. So you can see it has that small dome effect. Everything is covered, everything is in there, and now it is back to looking good. And I'm going to let that sit for a couple days covered, and we'll see what we get. And there it is. So this is on a light base right now on its side, and I love the way it turned out. You have that little bit of glitter from the holographic glitter in the background there, which really brings out the flowers. And like I said, if you have any micro bubbles, they are hidden. And you can see through the sides there, it's all nice and clear with that blue background. It really makes it shine. I love how the way the piece came out, and so do the customers. Well, there you have it, guys. It is done, and I hope you learned from my mistakes. We'll see you next time.